So we've got the configuration for a topic right here. Now let's focus on the producer so that we can produce stream of events. So back to IntelliJ, and still within config, let's create a new class. This will be named as Kafka Producer and then config. Let's annotate with add configuration here, and we're going to have a few things. So one is, if I put this full screen, I want to have the variable that will hold the Bootstrap server URL, so private and then string and then Bootstrap service, and this will come from value. And remember, so within our configuration file we have spring dot and then Kafka. And if I show you, so here basically I just want this, take that, go back, and let me just replace here, job done. Now we need to have the configuration that we can pass to a producer factory. Now this has to be in form of a map data structure. So let's just define that, public and then map. And we want to basically have the key to be a string, and then this will be object because it can be anything really. So maybe you want to have an integer or a string or a class or anything, right? So here I'm going to say producer config, and inside let's define the map. So new hash map, extract this to a variable, and I'm going to say props for property. Now let's say props dot put, and I need to put this configuration here called producer and then config, and this comes from Kafka clients producer dot, and then have a look. We can basically specify a bunch of configuration in here, but the one that I'm interested is the Bootstrap. Oops. So Bootstrap service, comma, and then the value will be Bootstrap and then service. I also want to define the serializer. So this is key and then serializer class config, and this in here will be so string serializer from Kafka common serialization dot class. So the key will be a string and also the value. So let's just duplicate this, and here I want to say dot and then value serializer. And for now, let's just say that we will send strings. And finally, let's just say return and then props. There we go. And this has to be a map, just like that. And also I just realized that the extraction didn't work as I wanted. So this has to be a string, and job done. Now let's define the producer factory, which is responsible for creating producer instances. So here we need to have a public method, and I'm going to say producer and then factory. The key for this will be a string and the value will be a string. And if you were to, for example, send a Java object, right? So your own class or record, this would be, for example, customer or maybe notification. But for now, let's just keep things simple and have a string in there. And I'm going to name this as producer and then factory. And within this method, all I want to do is to say return new and then default Kafka producer factory. And one thing that I need to pass inside is the config. So producer and then config. And finally, now that we have the producer config, which allows us to create Kafka producers, we need a way for us to send messages. Now this is possible with the Kafka template. So Kafka and then template. So the template also will be of type string and then string. So this is using generics. And again, if you were to send, for example, a custom object, this will be that custom object data type. So let's just say here Kafka template. And inside of this Kafka template, I want to return new and then Kafka template. And Kafka template, if I press Command P in here, takes the producer factory. Now, this producer factory, let's just instantiate it as a bean. So at and then bean. And let's take this in here, Command C, and we're going to paste it inside here. And so this is using dependency injection now, and then pass the factory inside, and job done. And last but not least, so that this works, we need to say at and then bean. And there we go. Now that we have the producer configuration, next let's go ahead and learn how we're going to send a message to our topic.